Wow, nice.
All right. I see some students entering our room. Welcome, everybody. We're going to give it just a minute or two to let everybody get on the call, and then we'll get started. All right. Good. People loading in. That looks good. For those of you that are joining us as guests, we ask if you please turn off your mic and your video for this first portion of our talk. We're going to have a moderated conversation, and there will be plenty of time afterwards for questions for our panelists. So please hold on to those questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. And when we're done with our panel discussion, we will welcome you to open up your mics and your video so we can have a conversation. All right, sound good? This event is being recorded, and by recorded, it's just the panel conversation that will be recorded, not the Q&A afterwards. Gosh, just super excited to be here today. So welcome, everyone. A couple more people still coming on board. Alrighty. Great, good to see all these names up on our screen. So we have a great audience today, and I'm even more excited about the panel we have. My name is Mary Kober. I work in the Career Center here at Sac State, and I am super excited to be working in partnership with the College of Natural Science and Math and Degrees project to bring this really fabulous team of panelists today. I'm going to do a really quick round of introductions of our panelists, and then we're going to just launch into an in-depth conversation where you can learn more about them, their career paths, the choices that they've made, and hear some insights and tips from them about what might be helpful for you as you embark on your careers. So to get started, I'd like to introduce you to Ryan Takeo. He works with Stripe, which is a technology company that builds economic infrastructure for the internet. They work with businesses of every size, from new startups to public companies, and they use the software to accept payments and manages their businesses online. He works with corporate finance and strategy at Stripe. I'd also like to introduce you to Jason Grunhagen. Jason works with Genentech. He comes to us today with over 15 years of experience in drug development at various molecular platforms, phases of development, and companies across the industry. Genentech, for those of you that don't know the name, is a biotechnology company pursuing groundbreaking science to discover and develop medicines for people with serious life-threatening illnesses. And last but not least, we have Robert Custodio. He works at the California Department of Public Health. Oh, I forgot to have you guys on mic. We'll do that in a sec. Robert, you want to say hi?
Aloha.
Hi, so that's Robert. Robert works in the unit in California Department of Public Health that administers licensure of radioactive materials for industrial use. I'm not going to tell you a whole lot more because we're going to dive into that as we go along. So thank you, all three of you, for joining us today. And since I started with you, Robert, I'll ask you our first question.
Yep.
I'd love to just have you share with us your career journey. If you look back at when you, if you look back at when you first started to decide what you wanted to do, I'd love to hear your journey of how you made that decision and how you made your way along to the place you are today.
I was an unusual child. I knew pretty early on, probably from second or third grade, that I wanted to pursue a career in physics. Fast forward many years, and when I graduated from Sac State, I had the intention of going to undergraduate school. But my now wife, at the time, had just gotten accepted into UC Davis vet school. So the prospect of both of us being in graduate school simultaneously didn't really fit with the financial aspects of, just being able to exist. So the graduate school got put on hold for the time being, and needed to find a job. And luckily I was in contact with a former classmate who was working at RHB. She has since left, but she told me about this position with the state. It was a little difficult initially trying to find positions, well, really anywhere in the field of physics that were accepting bachelors. Most of them wanted masters or PhDs. But luckily this was kind of an entry-level position with the state. And it was actually kind of funny during the interview process, the hiring manager, who's actually been my manager now, or my direct supervisor, my direct report for 11 and a half years. And we've actually been, we've developed quite the relationship. He actually assured me that we're hiring you with the prospect that you know nothing. So that was really helpful. But it was an entry-level position. They were looking for people with the skill set that you develop while attaining your bachelor's, not necessarily the knowledge that you either have or don't have. So really, that was probably the best fit for me because I was able to use a lot of the tools that I had gained while at Sac State and not necessarily the information that I was able to retain. And here I am 11 years later, started out pretty much at the bottom rung as a junior health physicist, worked my way up, promoted in place a couple times to associate, and then when a senior supervisor position came open, I applied and was accepted. And so now I'm managing a unit of 6 other technical experts. And as Mary pointed out, our unit is responsible for the licensure and administration of radioactive materials within the state of California for industrial applications. Basically anything that doesn't go into a human being falls under our purview. And that's the very long explanation of what I do.
Not long at all, and incredibly stable, Robert. That's pretty amazing. You wanted to do super young, plugged in, still there. Really interesting. Wow. Jason, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind addressing that same question, to share with us a little bit about how you got even decided on where you wanted to go and how you ended up, at Genentech.
Well, thank you. Yeah, happy to share, and thank you for the invite, and hello to everybody. I swear I know at least 1 or 2 names from when I got to visit in person last year. So my career journey starts really, I knew I wanted to go to college. I couldn't decide where, and I chose a school in the Midwest, growing up in the Midwest, Truman State University. Went there with the knowledge that my best subject was math, but I didn't want to major in math. So I knew I wanted to go into sciences. I wasn't sure which one. I took a biology course first. It's always been my passion on biology, and it was okay. And then I took my first chemistry course. It was fantastic. And it was probably 6 months after that that I met the man who convinced me to come talk today. So my undergraduate research professor is this very young man, at least on my screen, to my right. So Yin-Fa Ma was my research advisor when I was in undergraduate. So we worked on research together. I didn't teach classes, he taught me classes. So I majored in chemistry, finished my degree in chemistry, and somebody, perhaps 2 people to my right, convinced me that I should go to graduate school. And so I did. I followed him to his alma mater, Iowa State University, and did my PhD there with Ed Young. Coming out of the PhD, my wife and I were both going to be PhDs, so finding 2 PhD positions, quite challenging. You knew you couldn't stay in Ames, Iowa. So we really looked at the different coasts where the big pharma areas were, and lucky enough, I found a position, and my wife found a position in Johnson & Johnson in the Bay Area. Was with them for about 3 years, went to another small company, spent about a year there, and then that company ran out of money. And so at that point, I was laid off, but not for very long, and I found Genentech 12 years ago. So at Genentech, like I said, 12 years, started off as an individual contributor and worked my way up, always in the chemistry area. So we work on developing drugs for all kinds of diseases. And at this point, I run a 25-person team, associate director in analytical chemistry department at Genentech.
Awesome, thank you. And while we have you visible, Yin-Fa, just in case all the students don't know who you are, you want to just say a quick hi?
Sure. My name is Yin-Fa Ma, and I'm the Associate Dean for Research and Engagement in the College of Natural Science and Mathematics. And I know I do not know a whole lot of students because I do not teach anymore. I really miss my teaching and the research part involved students. I love it. Jason knows me definitely very well. And that's my passion. But you know, right now it's just the one person, and I hope someday I can go back to teach and work with my student on research projects. Okay, thank you everyone, and thank you for coming. It's a really great opportunity for you to learn from the experts.
And I'll second, Yinfa was one of the best teachers we had at our university, and yeah, amazing person. He inspired a lot of us.
Oh, thank you.
And Yinfa is also the driving force behind this event. So thank you, Yinfa, for working with us and bringing this together. So Yinfa he's the man doing it for us. So thank you.
Okay,
Right.
we're on the same team. Thank you.
Yes, we are. All right. Jason, I love that you mentioned that you did not like math. That's a perfect segue for Ryan to dive in and tell us a little bit about your career journey.
I know you stole my point there. I was going to.
Oh.
I see why you got the panel right. Yeah. So I majored in math because I felt like honestly it was something that was maybe in demand, could get me a job. I felt like before transferring to Sac State from community college, I felt like I was good at math. When I got to Sac State, I realized I really wasn't that great. When you realize how bright students are, it's at four-year universities. But long story short, I found a company called Anaplan, which was a startup, now a public company that had a booth at the career fair at Sac State. And so I got an internship there. Like Jason mentioned, I was actually working hourly at Comcast, a call center, while going to Sac State, and I got laid off from there. Which was tough with like the hours and school schedule, but turned out to be like a blessing in disguise because at the career fair I found Anaplan and picked up an internship where I worked remotely while still attending Sac State and worked like a part-time job, and they let me man the support desk, which was like a virtual thing, and then it transitioned into a full-time gig. I got sent out to a client on like the first week after I graduated. I'll say I had taken 4 years off between like high school and college. So at that point, you're just ready to kind of hit the ground running. And it was interesting, I'd say, like we kind of get into like later points, but, when you're exiting, Sac State, you still like looked for other jobs as well, but you feel like this was a good company, which is a planning tool. It's kind of like Salesforce is to like Access or a database. This is to Excel. Anaplan is. And so leverage that background, did a bunch of travel. I got to implement the software for various clients over a year. Admittedly got a little burnt out. Then I went in-house to work at a company, Pandora, and leveraged that to get into finance or FP&A, and worked there for 5 years. Like a lot of these, folks have mentioned, started as an individual contributor, using a technical background, and got a lot of broad finance experience, saw the company grow, had some tough times, layoffs, acquire companies, ultimately got acquired by SiriusXM after 5 years. Worked my way up to senior manager there, and then joined this company, Stripe, which is a very large payments company, a late stage private company. I've been here for a little over a year now, where it's kind of at an earlier stage than say like Pandora was, post public, which I'm sure we'll kind of get into those, experiences and things like that. But yeah, that's what I do now.
Interesting phrase, leveraging your background. We're going to come back to that later because there's a lot behind what that means, and I think students would probably be curious about what that is. But if we stay for a minute just on those beginnings of your career, I'm curious how that process went for each of you in terms of the decision-making process, or I'm hearing a real wide variety. How did you know? In some cases, were you just exploring, or how did you make the choices that you made early on in terms of your choice of major and then that first step you take when you jump out? Jason, Ryan, you sort of mentioned that you kind of found somebody at a career fair and it was just a good fit, and your internship leveraged. Robert, I'm curious for you because you went way back when you talked about your interest in physics. And I'm just curious how that played out for you in the decision-making process. Did you think about other choices along the way? How did that work for you? I'm always curious when somebody has such a nice, clean, straightforward background.
Well, I idealized it quite a bit. There was I'll be the first to admit, and I'm sure my advisor, who's at Sac State still, will probably attest to this. I wasn't the best student coming right out of high school. My first attempt at college was disastrous, to say the least. So there was a moment in time where I had deviated and pursued very momentarily for about a semester a different career path. I was actually a behavioral sciences major for a semester. Quickly got my act together and said, okay, no, this isn't what I wanted to do. It's physics. Physics is where my heart was. And so I came back to it and really hunkered down and focused and got through it. As far as the career choice, closing in on graduation at Sac State, I always joke, I felt a little bit like a prisoner being released and not knowing how to function in this society of, oh God, what do I do now? And like I said, my now wife at the time she got accepted to UC Davis. So I knew I was going to be, I don't want to say stuck because that sounds terrible. I knew I was going to be in this area geographically for a while, for at least the next 4 years. So I figured something in and around Sacramento would have been necessary. And being the state capital, I figured, state employment, why not? I mean, they're in the city of Sacramento, they're the largest employer. So I figured the probability of finding a job with them is going to be pretty high for someone like me. And luckily enough, I through connections that I made at Sac State, actually, I was able to find the position with the Department of Public Health.
Great, thank you, and I appreciate you sharing that. I haven't met anyone yet who didn't have some moments along the way where there was exploration or a hiccup or whatnot. So I'm just always curious about these beginnings. And Jason, I would love it if you wouldn't mind talking us through a little bit about those early days. I know there were several steps in your education getting to the doctorate level, but if you can think back to when you were first getting your bachelor's degree and what that was like when you were making those choices towards graduate school or not.
Yeah, as I was kind of mentioning, I think something key to me is again, the math side. I like mathematicians, Ryan. I just didn't want to be one. Now, I knew I was really passionate about science. It's not always what you're best at. I think you should try to stick with something close to what you're good at. Like if you're really passionate about music, but you're terrible, perhaps musician is a hobby rather than a life skill. Chemistry hit me great. I mean, I really expected to go into biology because I love science so much, but chemistry gives you that side. And I was curious about physics. I always want to go back and read my physics textbook again. Nerd that I am. But that chemistry hit me because it was a combination of the math that I was good at and the science that I was really passionate about. And then approaching graduate school or getting to the end of graduate school, I had Yinfa telling me, you have to go to graduate school. You have to go to graduate school. You don't just trust Yinfa, you don't trust anybody. You really got to search inside yourself. And so I did. And I spoke to a couple other professors and said, I'm really trying to figure out what I want to do. And one of the professors, Griff Freeman, who Yinfa knows well, I spoke with him and he kind of just asked me two questions, and I wish I remembered them exactly, but it was like, okay, do you feel like you've learned everything you want to learn? I said, no. And he says, do you want I don't remember the second question, but at the end of my second question, he's like, well, I think you answered your questions. You should go to graduate school. And so that confirmed Yinfa's opinion that I should go to graduate school. And that's where I made that jump. To me, it was really about asking yourself, am I done? Because when you're in high school, you're kind of thinking, okay, do I want to go to graduate school? Am I done challenging myself and learning and pushing myself? And the answer is no, I'm not done. I want to go to college. So you go to college and you get your bachelor's degree. At the end of that, you have to stop and you say, okay, am I done now? And for me, the answer, as Griff helped me figure out, was no, I'm not done. I want to go to graduate school. And as I went and got my PhD, which is something that is really a war of attrition against yourself. So I can't tell you how many times I thought, okay, I'm done. As I was getting down to my PhD, you can actually go become a professor like Yinfa, or you can go into industry. And honestly, it's more toil and work getting grants, establishing yourself a lab, really working long hours to do what Yinfo was. And that was the moment in my life where I said, you know what? I think I'm done. I am done pushing myself. I've done as much as I want to be. So I know our professor who Yinfa and I both worked for, Ed Young, when I told him that I was going to go into industry, he was kind of shocked. He's like, I thought you were going to follow Yinfa and me into the world of academics. That was it. So that's kind of the decision and the way I reflect on where I went at each point when I got to the end of it is, am I ready to join the real world, or do I want to continue to push my education further? Am I willing to push my education further? And that's the question I ask myself kind of each point in my career. Hope that's useful.
Well, and Jason, I want to follow up on you, and I know, and actually, you were the second undergraduate student published a really high quality paper even before go to graduate school. That's really awesome.
He made me do it.
He get a really high quality publication before he went to graduate school. He's great. I thought he definitely will be a faculty, but turned out to be an industry leader today.
That's right.
It's really wonderful too. So I'm so proud. I'm good.
Maybe one last comment, because it made me think of it. You know, my passion for biology never died. When I left Genentech, you know, you can go to many different companies for chemistry, but I knew it had to be pharmaceutical industry. It had to be. I have to work on drugs because those drugs are really focused on the biology. And so though I am a chemist, I do chemistry. As I would not have been happy if I went to like the oil industry or something like that. I had to be in chemistry or in pharma, sorry.
Thank you, Jason. Really interesting to hear how important certain relationships are along the way in our development, yes. Ryan, you talked a little bit about some of the different chunks of your life early on and what it was like when you first graduated. I wonder if you could just go a little bit more into your decision-making process and maybe speak a little bit to what influenced you and how you made the decisions along the way, especially with that math degree, which I know it doesn't always have an obvious application in the direction that you went.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of think, I mean, I think math, you look at it and, you know, you're like, okay, you can kind of take two paths. Like Jason said, you can kind of keep going, you know, and you get like a master's, you know, doctorate, things like that. You know, if you want to go into kind of the corporate world, you know, there are quite a few applications, you know, depending on, you know, like Jason said, kind of what you're good at and like also what your interests are. So there's that dynamic of, you know, would you be interested in potentially like a finance job, marketing job? A lot of those fields are employing, you know, a ton of like analytics from data and things like that, you know. And so when I was graduating 2013, you know, I had the internship, but I was still, you know, kind of looking at the career, looking at other opportunities, of which, you know, quite frankly, there were some in Sacramento. One was, I think, CGI or something like this, a government contracting firm. You got an offer from them. And then, of course, you know, you're kind of your existing employer, but, you know, you looked at, you know, the Bay Area was, of course, appealing, you know, because you're like, okay, it's a startup company. You know, out of college, you know, you want to kind of get in somewhere, but there's still so many opportunities to pivot, you know, along the way. You know, there's so many companies from big to small. You know, I work at, I guess, a mid-ish sized company. You know, Jason works at a huge company. You know, like Pandora got acquired by SiriusXM, a much larger company. You know, and within the larger companies, there are more narrow opportunities. More smaller companies, you get broader opportunities. You know, I think broadly speaking, I got some great advice one time from someone much more successful than I. You know, when looking for jobs, and you said look at it on three dynamics. One is the company, 2 is the manager, and 3 is the position, and not necessarily in that order. You kind of want to rank those accordingly when you're evaluating opportunities. And if you obviously hit on all 3, you maybe won the jackpot, but you're realistically, you may not hit on all 3, and maybe there's just 2 of them. And what are the 2 that are most important to you? Is it that, like Jason said, you love music, and you're good at math or something, and maybe Pandora is a great fit, but the role isn't quite what you want, but you want to get in to that company. So I think you kind of look at it across those, kind of 3 variables of work, and you can find a good fit for yourself. And knowing like you're never stuck, right? Like it's like, I think it's just as you become more senior in your career, sometimes making that move becomes a little more difficult. Like after me now having spent almost 7 years in like finance, it'd be a little tough to say, go take like a marketing role. I might have to like move laterally into something like that. But, early on, I think, it's really, get out there, see what you like. There's still a ton of opportunities out there. There's still a lot of opportunity to move around to different companies and different industries.
I appreciate your sharing that. And it makes me think we have such a great mixture of types of work environments between the 3 of you. I'd love to hear a little bit more, I think, about industry itself. If you could share maybe a little bit about the work culture, what it's like to work in state government, what it's like to work in a big corporate, what it's like to work in a startup, and how you evaluated your own value system, your own career values up against that as you were making your choices on where to work, and maybe help fill the students in a little bit about what these environments are like. Robert, do you mind kicking that off?
Yeah. I get asked a lot, what's it like working for the state? Because I know state employees have a certain reputation. But really the best word I can use to describe it is stability. To within reason, positions with this, I have coworkers that have been with the state literally since I was in high school, which is a very long time. And that's, I don't want to say unheard of in private industry, but it's very unusual to have that kind of tenure with a single organization. The best explanation that because my dad actually was one of the people that kind of steered me towards state work. His explanation of it was, you'll never drive a Ferrari working for the state, but you'll also never go hungry. And working for the state allows for a lot of flexibility for drivers as well. It's very, what to expect. Like there's no surprises. It's going to be very uncommon for you to walk in on Monday and your manager calls you in and says, hey, sorry, we're downsizing, clear your desk. There's something to be said for the like I keep coming back to the word because it's really the best one to describe it, the stability of state employment, of public service. And there's a fair amount of mobility too. I know a lot of the state positions, when they describe what their minimum qualifications or desirable qualifications are, they're very specific, but a lot of times it's not quite obvious that there's also a lot of wiggle room in there too. I kind of laugh because when I was on a couple hiring panels a while back, and when we were writing up the job descriptions for it, it's HR kept coming back to us and saying, well, you can't make it too specific. And the term they kept on forcing us to include in the qualifications was or related. So when they talk about educational requirements, it's like a bachelor's degree or bachelor's of science in physics, mathematics, or related. It's that or related that allows that kind of wiggle room. So, the stability and flexibility are probably the 2 biggest things that I guess the state would have to offer. The environment is a bit different from private industry, from what I can tell. We have a lot of people coming in from private industry that have different, I guess, outlooks on the way the organization should be run. It's very fair, for lack of a better word. There's no, there's very little favoritism involved. I know it's a public entity, but there's very little politics being played, at least internally, with the way the operations are being run. And yeah, I mean, those are the two biggest things I can say about the work environment is it's stable and at the same time flexible.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, you just all the jobs. I work a lot with state because I'm on the employer side at the Career Center, and I'm always amazed at the variety of opportunities in state government. It just kind of blows me away. It's amazing. So thanks for sharing that, Robert. Jason, what's it like to work at Genentech, and how does that fit for you in terms of your values and how you decided to work there?
I've done both. My longest tenure is Genentech, but I've worked at Genentech, and I've also worked at a 40-person. Them. So at some point, but I can speak about Genentech. I mean, the big companies are, their reputations, and you kind of know the environments going into them. We, for instance, in the Bay Area, we know that Gilead is a very hard-driving pharmaceutical biotech company. Genentech is also hard-driving, but they don't have the reputation for burning out their employees. And I've had friends who have gone to Gilead, and they're like, no, certain departments, and not everybody, of course. But yeah, you can kind of understand a little bit more from the outside what the culture is. And the culture doesn't change much because the company has grown up that way. And you have 12,000 people at Genentech. Hard to change that culture with one person. I think being at a small company, I think you're a little bit more, I don't know, from my experience, it was a little more defined by a certain number of people. So when I worked at a small company, we had a VP of, I don't remember, I think it was just sciences or something. He was one of the top 3 people of the company, and he independently kind of set the culture. And that was an interesting aspect for me because my approach was not his approach. He asked for there's no jeans at work. It's like, you have to wear slacks. And it's like, okay, that's kind of weird and very formal. And that's fine. That's the way he wanted to run the company. But he gets to make those decisions. Whereas at a larger company, it's much more a culture that's based on the whole company dynamic. A little bit of insight there. What I like about Genentech, and what I see in most of the people in Genentech, is the diversity of jobs and the ability to move around, the ability to learn about different things. So rotations, we've had surveys recently, and one of the most important things we've heard from our employees is we need access to rotations. Rotations let you delve into an area that you're perhaps not an expert, gain a little knowledge in that area, and if you really enjoy it and you can prove yourself, that makes it easier for you to move around within the company. And so it's a little easier at a company like Genentech to move around within your area, because even though I'm in analytical chemistry, there's regulatory sciences, there's quality, there's all these different groups that are tangentially related to us. And because we're such a massive company, that means I love Genentech. I feel like the culture is very much, we work our butts off, but we work our butts off because we care and we want to. And it's not cutthroat at all. That's another great thing. My colleagues and I will work together every day of the year. Maybe the only day we're competitive is the day we put ourselves up to be compared to each other to decide who gets the biggest raise. But the other 364 days of the year, we see success as the company and as a group as the way to succeed. So for me, yeah, I like the big companies. I have no issue with the small. Like I said, my next company will be small. I know that already, because I think they both offer you different benefits. And yeah, that's a little bit about big pharma.
Nice to hear big pharma feeling so collegial. That's neat. Yeah. And Ryan, on your side, if I understand correctly, you're currently in more of a startup type of environment, or I'd just love to hear a little bit more about work culture and what that's meant for you and what aligns for you.
Yeah, I would definitely echo all the things that Jason said. You're going to have, I've worked at, small person, like when I started Anaplan out of Sac State, it was like a 40-person shop, and you're working for the chief customer officer, and it's like 5 of us doing implementations. And so, it's interesting in that at that point, you're kind of the all singing, all dancing, you're the requirements gatherer, developer, everything. Whereas now the company has definitely a much more mature implementation model, probably, 5 to 10 people or something. So you get those experiences where then it evolved. I think when I left, it was like 250 people, or even then it was even far more mature. So, there's this constant change and just, figuring it out as you go. So you're really kind of like, putting the wheels on the bus while it's rolling down the road kind of thing. But, I think in all environments, it's always, when you're winning, it's going to be challenging. It's fun. It's tough. There's a lot of work. It's intense. And then Pandora was already public, where public companies, again, not a huge company, not like a Google or anything like that, but when you're public, you have a lot of these processes that have to be well defined for audited financials and things like this. So you have a lot more process. Tends to be sometimes a little bit easier to like fit into the role. It's a little more well defined. Where now, as you said, Mary, like Stripe is kind of somewhere in the middle. Like we're a late stage private company, but still it's growing like crazy. And you can imagine with a lot of these things, with COVID stuff shifting online, more companies have to accept payments, via the internet and things like that. And so still, as it is late stage, but private, you have like a little bit of dynamic of both. So you have this growth, but still figuring out like processes. So it's kind of an interesting mix. But when the company is doing well, it's like I said, it's kind of always like the intense environment. But that's, you look at when teams are winning in sports or things like this. You want to spend more time in the gym, but it can be, it can be intense. And especially because of those kind of things you have to do as a public company, there may not be as much like coverage per se as, like a Google, where like, there's definitely a, if you weren't there, 3 people could probably do your job and they could, fill that in pretty easily. Whereas the smaller the company, it's definitely not the case. But like Jason said, it offers you, the dynamics are different, and you kind of often see yourself wanting to like oscillate between the two, because sometimes you get to go like really deep in a certain area, and then sometimes you're like, I kind of maybe went too far into this area. Then you're like, well, I want to like do something really broad and not be a master of none kind of thing. So, you kind of can pick and choose, and I think you kind of want to get out there and experience both to see like what best suits you and what do you like. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah. Thanks, Ryan. I love hearing how all of you having this interest, even though you're pretty far along in your careers, to try new things, and you keep exploring, and change always happens. And I love hearing that, because I think it's an important thing to recognize, especially when, if you're in college and you're new and you're looking to get started. I think sometimes there's this illusion or this idea that it's going to be this straightforward thing, and then you're stuck at whatever you choose, but it goes on my mind now. I'm thinking, well, as a student, what do you need to do to get your foot in the door? So how does it work? How do you get started? Like I loved that phrase, leveraging your background. Heard a couple of you say it. And what is that like for a recent graduate? They're leveraging their educational background, maybe internship background. I'd love to hear your viewpoints on what you would suggest for students in terms of what skills are important, what should they pull forward, how do they sell themselves, how do they get their foot in the door? And I'll bounce back to you, Jason, if that's okay for starting off that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to. I think I get to take the obvious one that I think Ryan and Robert will both echo. It's your network. That is really, really, really where it's the best place to develop. So when I saw the call today, Christian's name popped up on my mind, because I remember meeting last year and exchanging emails. And so even though we didn't get anything done, there's a connection that will remain, and I'll be an ally. So I think leveraging your network and building your network is so important. And it's hard. And one aspect of that too, just to point out bluntly is that everybody's busy. And so sometimes your network will fall off, but don't be afraid to reach back out to them. Don't feel embarrassed that, oh, I lost touch, or, so-and-so didn't email me back. They probably got busy, or you got busy, and we're all human beings. We understand that. So network your butt off. Find the people around you who can help you be allies to you. And I think I've told many different people that, your network grows too. I've been at 3 companies in the Bay Area. So I've got colleagues at 3 different companies, but those people are no longer at the same company, which means I have colleagues at 25 different companies. I'm married to a PhD who has been at 3 different companies, which means that her companies is full. So we know people at probably 50 different biotech companies throughout the Bay Area. Use them. Jason, do you know anybody that works at this company? No problem. I can look it up on LinkedIn. It's the beauty of having LinkedIn. Sorry, man, I know nobody at this company. Or, oh yeah, a friend of mine works there. So leveraging your network is one of the most important things. Distinguishing yourself is very, very difficult on a resume. It is insanely difficult. I review tons of resumes, bachelor level. It is really, really hard. The best people we find are really coming in through recommendations. So that's your network. And if I have to go, I go look for internships, because at least if I see somebody doing an internship, I'll be like, okay, show me something in this resume that says you're exceptional. Because we are hiring, I think as Robert said it, or maybe it was Ryan, but you're hiring on potential. You're not hiring on the knowledge you have right now. You're hiring on the potential of the person. I don't have a person in mind when I go hire somebody. I don't have it's like, here's the job I want you to be able to do tomorrow when I come in. No, I expect you to know nothing, Robert. I expect you to come in with that brain, and I expect you to take that training you have from school and learn. And I want to know that in 2 years, I'm going to have made the best call. And that's hiring on potential is really what we do. So how do you distinguish yourself? You're just looking for anything. Somebody's got an internship. You're like, that's something. Sometimes I look and I see somebody who's an Eagle Scout. And I was like, all right, it's something, because you see 100 resumes. It's really hard to distinguish yourself. So first and foremost, it has to be your network. You have to build your network. And number 2 is develop your soft skills and your interview skills, because the whole idea that I had coming out of grad school, and my wife as well, is like, just give me an interview, because I know when I get in, I can wow people on an interview. So work on those soft skills, those presentation skills. You want to be able to know that you're only going to get interviews at, let's say, 1 out of 20 jobs. But when you get that one, make sure you've got the presentation skills that you can go in, or the communication skills, so that you can go in and really set that positive energy for the person, that first impression that says, this person's going someplace. This woman is going someplace. This guy is going someplace. So for me, that's my advice to you guys, and how to prepare yourselves for the most difficult task in your life, which is finding your first job.
So true, Jason. I think I always think about, looking for work is much harder than the job will be once you get there a lot of times. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Robert, I wonder if you can expand on that a little bit. I'm a little bit familiar with state government, and I know that the process is quite different. Can you share us a little bit about what advice or what you think would be helpful for students to know?
Yeah. Anyone watching this, rewind that last 2 or 3 minutes from what Jason said and watch that repeatedly. It's I hate to coattail, but it really is about the interview. People, I mean, just think about how many people graduate from Sac State with a bachelor's degree every semester, and being able to distinguish yourself from all those other people on that same row sitting in the auditorium. I mean, it's really getting to that point where you can do the face-to-face and show them that I'm different. I can fill the need. When I applied for my position with the state, I was kind of laughing because one of the panelists who interviewed me, just a quick rundown on the panel that was interviewing me. It was a master's from Rutgers, a master's from Oregon State, a PhD from MIT, and I believe a master's from some university back east. I think it was Tennessee. And so I'm going into this position going like, well, I have a bachelor's from Sac State. But it's not about what's on the resume. It's how you project yourself during the interview and being able to demonstrate that. The soft skills, I mean, Jason, I want to like reach through the computer here and give you a hug, because I wish more people, because I've been on three interview panels now with the state, and it's frustrating to see the people that come in. You see on their resume, it's like, oh, this person has a master's in health physics from such and such a school. They had a 4.0 GPA. They did all these internships, and then you get in and they interview, they're doing this the entire time. I mean, the hiring process for the state is very different from private, because we're very confined on the way we conduct the interview. We can only ask the interview questions. We can't ask open-ended questions. We can't ask what's not already prepared for. So I mean, trying to get these people, like, to pry them out of their shell, it's like, come on, say something, you know, and just the soft skills are, like I said, Jason, thank you. I wish every student who watches this, just if they get nothing else from that, practice interviewing, practice, you know, I mean, I know it sucks having to talk about yourself, because I'll be the first to admit it sounds like bragging, but you really need to project that during an interview. Yeah, everybody else that we're interviewing here and everyone after you, I mean, you're all bachelors, you all have some science degree. What makes you different? And the way you project that is, how are you going to fill the need for the job that you're hiring for? And networking is big. I mean, I wouldn't have this job if it weren't for networking. So, I mean, again, keep in touch, ask. I mean, when you're getting close to graduation, if you had classmates that have already graduated, I mean, I know Facebook's kind of an old person thing now, but absolutely LinkedIn. I mean, anybody you know, just add them to your network and just see where they're going with their career trajectory, and be like, oh, hey, this guy is celebrating his second year at such and such a company, and just shoot him a message saying, hey, how do you like it? I mean, he'll probably email you back and say, no, it sucks, don't come here. Or you might get someone that says, no, this is absolutely great. By the way, we're hiring people. You're graduating soon, right? Yeah, come on over. And that really is the hard part, is like Jason said, setting yourself apart. And the way to do that is soft skills during the interview and recommendations. I'm trying to count in my head. I've had at least 4 that I can remember. It's probably more. Sac State graduates just in our branch, and we're not a particularly big branch. We're only about 200 people, which is tiny within. I mean, there's some state organizations that have literally thousands of people, and so we're a relatively small branch. And at least 4 times I've had a hiring manager come to me going, you went to Sac State, right? It's like, do you know this person? And they'll show me the application and be like, oh, yeah, absolutely. I know that guy. He's awesome. And I mean, at least 4 have been hired that I can recall. And I can't even remember the number of people that have come to me asking about it. And at least 2 of the people I didn't really know personally. I knew of them. I mean, it's been a while since I've been at Sac State. So, I mean, the classes have kind of separated a little bit, but I know who they were. And I don't know if it was on my recommendation or what, but just being able to get that extra plus in your column. So when you do come in for the interview, you know, while they're talking to you, they're like, oh, this is the guy that Rob said was pretty good. And so I mean, if it comes down to it, you and someone else, and they have no idea who that person is, and it's like, okay, Rob said this guy was cool. I don't know who this person is. I mean, chances are pretty good they're going to give it to the person that gets the recommendation. So absolutely, networking, soft skills. My really only other contribution would be take any class, anything that you can think of. Fill that unit load as high as you possibly can without killing yourself. Because you never know when it becomes useful down the road. After I got hired, and I was talking to the hiring manager about it, and I kind of asked, was like, okay, what set me apart? What did I do right? And he said it was a scientific instrumentation certification. It's not a course, because it was a couple of different classes. It was a program that I took at Sac State where you kind of go into scientific instrumentation with circuitry and implementation and stuff like that. And he says, that's what we're looking for this position. We need someone who's good with instrumentation. And if I hadn't taken that, other than my, amazing personality, I don't think I would have gotten the position. So take take everything. I mean, like I said, I got to the point where my advisor came to me, is like, all right, you got to go. I mean, you have no classes left. I mean, you're done. Go live your life. And I wanted to keep taking more. So, I mean, even if it's just at the undergraduate level, take everything. Don't think of the unit requirement as a minimum. Okay, I need to get to that and then I'm done. No, take everything. Learn to explore every opportunity that you have. Undergraduate opportunities, internships. I hate to sound like I'm parodying Jason, but he brought up all the good points. If you know you want to work for a good company, call them up. I mean, even if it's just the main trunk line saying, hey, I'm a junior, I'm graduating next year. Do you guys need any student assistants? Do you need any student interns? And check it out. I mean, like I said, you might go in there and be like, wow, this place sucks. I don't want to work here. Or it's be like, oh no, this is amazing. And then interviews come back around and you can write on there, interned at Acme Industries for the summer. And it's like, oh, this kid was already here. And so that already gets you a leg up. So yeah, soft skills, absolutely. Networking, and take every class possible that's available to you.
Thank you, Robert and Jason, both of you. I mean, you are just saying what we always want to hear, you know, because in the Career Center, obviously, we live in this space. So thank you. We can talk more and more about this subject matter. And I do appreciate, Robert, that you brought up, you know, that idea of how do you build your network, and absolutely LinkedIn being so important. But your alumni base at Sac State, especially if you're staying regionally here, it's now 1 in 20 residents of the Sacramento area are alums of Sac State. So that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, right? So thank you for that. Ryan, I imagine you have obviously been in a variety of settings, and I imagine you got there partially by people you met along the way. I'd love to just hear your take on this subject matter and what you would advise students in terms of getting started.
Yeah, you know, like Robert said, go back to what Jason had and, you know, rewatch it again. But, you know, I think honestly, I'm very proud to be, as and Robert also said something, you know, I'm proud that I work with a lot of folks that have, you know, like an MBA from like Stanford Business School or something, you know, and I have a, you know, math degree from Sac State, right? So like, don't think you can't do it. And I also saw something on a job post one time that said, you know, studies show that like if you meet 50% of the requirements, you can still be considered, because, you know, like Jason said, a lot of it's on potential, right? So like if you had all the requirements, then, you know, I mean, of course there's some hard and fast, you know, requirements that you have to have, right? But you don't need to have like, you know, all of them, because then it might not be as compelling to hire you. You know, and again, kind of with what Jason said, I mean, the other day, someone actually that I know from that I used to play soccer with, you know, hopefully, you know, be back soon. But, you know, it's been maybe 6-7 months, I guess, since we've last played soccer in a league in Alameda over here. You know, reached out to me about a job at Stripe, and, you know, we got on a Zoom call. So like, you know, like a gentleman said, you know, she reached out to LinkedIn and said, hey, you know, are you willing to, you know, chat with my friend about, you know, the company, et cetera. And so, you know, we talked at like, I don't know, 5:30 or something on Zoom. So I think it's, you know, leveraging, you know, your network and seeing like where folks are at roles, and you can kind of make that connection working on chatting over Zoom. I mean, it's tough, y'all, you know, like it's, even for me, like, you know, you had Zoom calls in the office and now it's all remote. So I think you want to pick up on those cues of, you know, does Mary like look confused after what I'm, you know, describing? And so you want to like pick up on those things like, oh, am I not explaining that right? And so I think those like kind of skills of, and like telling your story. So where you can get that experience from, you know, folks that are either in the industry or work at a company, or someone like, you know, like Jason, maybe you know, a hiring manager, a manager of a manager, a position that you may want, where you can kind of get those questions that those folks are going to ask you, and you know, how you conduct yourself. I'll say, I think the only thing I can add is that, you know, like Dr. Ma mentioned something about, you know, Jason being a great writer, and we have at different, you know, companies, this varies, whether like some companies value like slide decks as output. We have like huge writing culture here. So I think to the extent, you know, you're idle, you know, not working, like I said, it's tough. It's very competitive. You have a lot of folks who, you know, companies, they're winners and losers throughout this. And it's really just very competitive. So don't even, you know, don't get discouraged, you know, even if you get to the interview stage, it doesn't work out, you've got to keep going. But to kind of distinguish yourself, one thing that's big where I work is kind of like having like a write-up. So like to the extent you're in math and there's like some publicly available data sets, be it COVID, something else, whatever, politics, sports, whatever you want, and you could have some like write-up you create on Google Sheets from like open source data, stuff like that you can kind of show, some like technical skills, or SQL and things like that. And then, like the gentleman said, when you conduct the interview, that, you're professional, you're well-spoken, you can present your material. That's really how I feel like one way you can differentiate yourself, of which, of course, just reiterating that the hardest part is getting in the door. And then a lot of that does happen by referrals, just with like how competitive it is right now. Times will change. So, if you keep going and this will all come around to where it'll be an employee's market again. But, I think that would be like my best recommendation that I could add on.
Thanks, Ryan. You bring up a really good point. These are not usual times, right? And for students, those who are going to graduate in the next year, or maybe just graduated, it's a very different landscape. And we talked a fair amount here about some of those core skills. And I'd just love to get your take and your advice and your feedback on, if you were in a student's shoes, maybe who studied a lab science or something along those lines, what's the best way? I mean, you kind of alluded to that idea of coming up with an example, but how would you encourage them to show their experiences? And let's say that opportunity to do that hands-on lab didn't happen, or maybe it was a remote experience. How do you leverage that and be successful in terms of the skills in this remote world?
Yeah, I'd say at least in like the private company tech space, a lot of like, SQL, R, these kind of languages are very desirable because you'd run like statistical modeling, which is, insanely valuable at times like this. Like, I can't tell you how much, modeling we've done at work and like with data science of like, what is the, downside, upside, and anywhere in between and beyond look like. So I think that's one thing that comes to mind in terms of like a technical skill that's always very valuable, where you can like, show, what you've done with like the code and the data, the whole thing, you putting in like Google Sheets and something like that. I think is the kind of the one thing that comes to mind. I'm trying to think what else in terms of technically speaking. I would say, if you have stuff like, right, I've seen that, folks like develop web pages or things like that. I think you kind of find, with your idle time, what other skills can you learn? And it kind of piggybacks on those points of like, the company needs you for a role. And like, if they, I don't know if I answered that well though, maybe not.
Sorry, and I had the total internet glitch, so I missed the last part of your sentence, but hopefully everybody else got it. It was just me. But thank you for that. Yeah, along the lines of this remote world we're living in, and that sort of new challenge that students have to stand out and to make connections and to be successful connecting. Jason, do you have any additional advice for that? Or maybe there's a different skill set that's coming forward that maybe students might already be developing while they're here?
Well, I think you look at, I would love to take Ryan, send him back to Yinfa, get him a chemistry degree, and man, we could do some things, Ryan, because I know that, those of us who are in industry now, we don't have access to all the big data, to all the tools that are being developed in the IT world. And so you see worlds meshing together. So we just reorganized my department, and I formed a group that's specifically looking at analytics, modeling, big data, artificial intelligence. What can we do around this area? I know we're a chemistry company. But I know we need these tools, and I know they're useful to us. I just don't know where. So, I mean, it perhaps is looking at where is the world moving? And I can see where these are really diving together. So do a little bit of research on that. Even if you don't do that in your undergraduate career, before you come interview, again, it's all about distinguishing yourself. So maybe take that. That's something specifically that if somebody came to me and said, well, in my free time, I did, DFT calculations and I did some modeling and this and stuff, I'd be like, oh crap, really? This is your free time? So, I don't think I'll have much more than Ryan says. It is a challenging time. So it's really just looking at where the opportunities are. And, tomorrow it might be something completely different that is starting to emerge, and, be on the forefront of that, because those of us who didn't have that experience, who didn't have that education, we're looking at it saying, man, we need somebody who knows this stuff because they're going to help me drive what I want to do. I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want to do something.
Robert, do you want to add to that at all? Is there anything a student can do during the state application process that might be happening virtually, or are there certain skill sets that are coming, core skill sets or soft skills that are coming farther up the chain there as things are becoming more remote?
I kind of laugh because the tiers are slightly different from private to public. One of the things that I always try to stress to my people, because there's a lot of mobility within the state. Some of it is not always voluntary. So what I always try to tell them is, keep yourself useful, keep yourself relevant, and and this seems like such a no-brainer or such a basic thing, but the one thing I would love, actually, if more applicants came in with this, is don't take for granted some of the basic stuff. This sounds a little foolish, but Microsoft Office, I mean, you'd be amazed at the number of applicants that we have come in. And I mean, it's a pretty standard question on most state most state interviews is, what would you say your expertise is with Microsoft Office? Then you get well, I've used Word. I mean, but you got to think, at least for science positions, you want to have something a bit more useful, a bit more applicable. So yeah, definitely don't take for granted some of the more basic, just computer ability, computer skills, programming language. Brian mentioned SQL. Absolutely. I would love to have an applicant come in and be like, oh yeah, I know how to program in SQL for Excel or for Access. I mean, I would probably have a stroke, because that's far and above what most people come in with. So I mean, just some of the basic tools that are being used. I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, you can go onto like YouTube and find, crash courses on Excel, Access, PowerPoint, Word, all of that stuff. And just, I mean, if nothing else, just to be able to come into the interview and be like, oh yeah, I can do VBA on Excel. I mean, that alone will set you above, I would say, at least 90% of the people. Don't even take anything for granted, as far as what you can bring to the table.
Yeah, if I could do two things and then I could move it on. I think that you've reminded me of a couple of things. Like Robert said, Excel or like Google Sheets is out there, and like you can do almost like now anything you can do in Excel and Sheets. And it's very common. I don't want to scare you out, because like obviously, college grad entry level, you probably wouldn't have to do it like to a certain extent. Of course, if you had your own as well, but like a case study is very common, especially for folks who have, like say in finance of like 5 years of experience. And there's some pretty like even cool stuff you can do with like, even like Robert said, in Sheets, because that's like a de facto standard of like transferring information between folks. And you can even link them into like create charts and link it into a PowerPoint, even Google Slides. So you can like, now you can do almost like everything you can do in the even Office world and in Sheets. And the main thing when I stalled earlier was I was going to say your biggest asset, coming out of college, right, is that, you're relatively cheap, right? And that say like relative to like experienced folks, and so you want to like, leverage yourself where you can, if you're coming out of college and, it's cheaper to hire y'all and you're hungry, I think that's where like, guys said, to potential. So I missed that earlier. That was what I wanted to say.
Thanks, Ryan, and really good advice, and I appreciate your insights into, there's this sort of meshing of skill sets and industries, and how much big data is driving everything, and each three of you are coming from very different worlds, and you're all, but very similar original backgrounds on the undergraduate side. So it's neat to see that progression and that openness, and I'm hearing some strong themes of ability to learn and willingness and flexibility for candidates going in. I'm wondering if each of you had a chance to give a student one piece of advice of something that you wish you'd known when you were in their shoes, maybe just coming out of an undergraduate degree. What is it you wish you'd known, and what advice would you give these students? You're all you all had that look like, Ryan, how about you first?
I would say, I think one thing, I mean, I got an internship by virtue of, losing a job. I think, it would have been good to maybe leverage that better earlier on. I would say one point you mentioned, Mary, is that there's this notion of once you do something, you're stuck, but it's you're never really stuck. So I think you kind of got to get out there, right? And like I said, it may be, I don't think I'm going to go become a marketing professional tomorrow, right? But if I wanted to go pivot, maybe I'd have to go get maybe an MBA or something, but it's still not out of the realm of possibility of me pivoting to say a marketing gig or doing something just wildly different. So, I think it's, you got to get out there, and I'd say the thing I mentioned earlier of that, the advice I got from somebody is the company manager and position, you kind of evaluate that and say okay, maybe this is a great company and this person's going to invest in me, but it's not the role I love, but that can change over time, or maybe differently, maybe it's the role you love and company you'd want to go to and you're willing to take that gamble. That would be my advice.
Thanks. Jason, do you want to jump in there?
Sure, I'll give you two short ones, and they kind of related to what Ryan said, because I wholeheartedly agree. Number one, the first job you have at the first company you are at will not be the last company you work with. That's almost guaranteed. Maybe we'll be lucky, but my dad worked for 3M for 23 years in largely the same group for 23 years. The generation of my dad, that was it. It was the company first. This is not that world. So don't try to pin yourself to one company. Don't have that expectation. Chances are you'll be laid off. At least two of us in this panel have been laid off in their career already. Don't be afraid of it. It's a different world. So number one, don't expect the first company you work with is the last one. So don't have that kind of dedication to that company. Remember, it's your career, not the company. The second piece would be no job is forever as well. So you always think, do I want to take this job? And I think it reflects something Ryan said too. Do I want to take this position? You know what? That position you take will not be the last position you ever have. So take a chance on it. If you're like, this is something I'd like to try, or I don't know if I should try this, the answer probably should be yes, you should try it. Because you know what? If you don't like it, you can go find something else to work on. A quick thing there, as you guys are coming out of school, you've got a deadline. I must find a job now because I have no employment. The nice thing about where we are, and the sucky thing about being laid off, is that when you decide you want a new job, you're like, well, I'll just find a new job while I'm being paid for this job, and then I'll go do something new. It's a much more comfortable situation to be in. But don't get yourself stuck to one company, and don't get yourself stuck to one position. It's not the way to go.
Robert, what takeaways do you have?
Similar point. Don't narrow your focus too much. Open yourself. Allow yourself to open up to all the possibilities. The day after I graduated, I didn't even know the current position I'm in and grew in even existed, and it wasn't even on my radar. I had never even heard of it before. And like I said, here we are 11 years later, and I've grown far far beyond where I could have even imagined it. So don't allow yourself to laser focus too much on one goal, and because chances are I mean, I don't want to seem like a downer, but chances are pretty good you're not going to achieve that. I mean, I don't know what the statistics are, but I can't imagine it's very high, the number of people who graduated from undergraduate and knew exactly what they wanted to do and eventually did that and stayed there. I mean, like Jason said, I mean, you're probably not going to be with the organization from cradle to grave in your career. And that's a great thing. I mean, that's an absolutely great thing. I mean, I tell my people all the time, especially the ones that have been in the position for a long time. Don't you want to do something else? I mean, you explore, go out there and find something else. And again, to Jason's point, I swear to God, I'm not plagiarizing you. You just make up very good points. If it sucks and you go do it and you don't enjoy it, go do something else. I mean, there are far more jobs out there available to you than you'll ever have in your lifetime. So, I mean, you're not stuck. I mean, you get a job coming out of undergraduate out of desperation, but, start there. Make that your starting point. Don't make it your finishing point. While you're in that job, look for something else. I mean, unless you absolutely love the position that you're in, congratulations, you're the statistical aberration, but, try to find something else, try to find something different, try to, broaden your horizons, and don't think that, okay, I have a chemistry degree, I got to do something in chemistry. I mean, I have a physics degree. I mean, my career is loosely based on physics, but it's not only about physics. Allow that latitude to try other things, and don't be afraid to fail. I mean, if you go into a position and it sucks, just be like, oh well, I learned, and go do something else. So don't self-impose pigeonholing on yourself, and don't be afraid to try things, and absolutely don't be afraid to try things and fail. It was probably the best advice I could give soon-to-be graduates.
Actually, all of us, I don't know, I feel freer already just listening to all three of you. So I think that's fabulous advice and so true. I've been laid off. My dad was at his job for 45 years. I don't even tell you how many jobs I've had along the way. So it is unusual for someone to just stick with it. And that's such a freeing thing to hear. I'd love we have about 15 minutes left, and I'd love to open it up for students to ask you questions directly. So now for those of you there's on the call, please feel free to unmic, open your video. We'll see how opening the video goes. Sometimes with a lot of people on the call that causes things to not work, but we're totally open to it, especially if you want to say something, or if you prefer, you can throw some questions in the chat and we'll pose them to the panel. So send us